So, what if I told you that the way you experience the world, the way you see it right now, is basically a grand illusion? A really magnificent trick that your brain is playing on you every single moment of every single day. I mean, it feels perfect, right? Seamless and complete. But it's not. Today, we're going to pull back that curtain and look at the biological blueprint for sight and how it's all built on a foundation of some seriously clever shortcuts and some pretty profound deceptions. This quote right here it nails it. We all feel like we're watching this perfect, high-definition movie of reality. But as we're about to find out, that feeling is just a brilliantly constructed mirage. See, your eyes and brain, they aren't just passive cameras recording the world. Oh no, they are aggressive editors, constantly cutting and splicing reality just to make sense of it all. And that right there is the huge paradox we're going to unravel today. So here's our game plan. First, we're going to start by busting a really old but surprisingly intuitive myth about how vision even works. Then, we'll get into a massive biological problem our brains had to solve, what I call the Focus Scarcity Problem. From there, we'll dig into evolution's brilliant solutions, both in the mechanics of the eye and its neural hardware. And finally, we'll see how these incredible biological hacks became the direct blueprint for teaching machines how to see. All right, well, let's kick it off with part one, the grand illusion of sight. Because really, to understand the super sophisticated system we have now, you first have to appreciate just how deeply we misunderstood it for centuries. Our starting point for how we thought vision worked was fundamentally, almost poetically wrong. You know, the ancient Greeks, including the philosopher Plato, had this theory that honestly feels incredibly intuitive. It's technically called the extramission theory, but let's just call it the I-beam myth. The idea was that our eyes worked kind of like flashlights. They thought we were actively shooting out these invisible beams of energy that would go out, literally touch objects around us, and then bounce back to the eye, giving us the feeling of sight. And you can see why they thought that, right? I mean, it feels like we're actively looking at things. Our gaze feels like this directed, probing force we control. But of course, modern science came along and just flipped that entire model on its head. This was a huge shift in thinking. We went from seeing our eyes as active probers to understanding them as passive collectors. We don't shoot beams out, we're just constantly being bombarded by photons, tiny particles of light that have bounced off of everything around us. So our eyes aren't flashlights. They're more like incredibly powerful processors. Their whole job is to take this chaotic storm of incoming light and aggressively interpret it into something that actually makes sense. We're not light emitters, we are meaning makers. Okay, so now I want you to actually experience the core paradox of your own vision. No, really, do this with me right now. Hold your arm out straight in front of you and just focus all of your attention on your thumbnail. Get it perfectly sharp, see all the little details, the texture, the shape. You got it locked in? Good. Now, while keeping your eyes absolutely glued to that thumbnail, try to read any text you have in your peripheral vision. Maybe a book title on a shelf or something on your screen. You can't, can you? It's all just a big, indistinct blur. So the reason for that blur is a tiny, tiny piece of your anatomy called the fovea. While you're staring at your thumbnail, that's the only part of your entire visual field that's being projected onto it. The fovea is this little, densely packed pit of light-sensing cells right at the center of your retina, and it is the only, and I mean only, part of your eye that can see in sharp, high-definition detail. Everything else, all that stuff you were just trying to read in the periphery, is being seen by parts of the retina that are, by design, fundamentally low resolution. So here's the kicker. That tiny, thumbnail-sized window of clarity, it represents less than 1% of your total visual field. Just let that sink in for a second. 99% of what you think you see at any given instant is just a low-resolution smear that your brain is expertly and totally unconsciously filling in to create the seamless illusion of a perfect world. This is the mystery we're exploring. How do we build such a rich, detailed world from such a tiny little sliver of high-quality data? And this leads us right into our next section, the focus scarcity problem. Because this profound limitation, this tiny window of focus, it isn't a flaw in the system, not at all. It's actually one of the most brilliant and necessary efficiency hacks in the entire history of biology. Which leads to the obvious question, right? Why would evolution stick us with what seems like such a flawed system? I mean, if high-resolution vision is so important for, not getting eaten by a tiger, why not just make the entire eye a high-definition sensor from edge to edge? Well, the answer comes down to two things: energy and processing power. To process your entire visual field at the same high resolution as your fovea would create a truly catastrophic computational load. The data stream would be just overwhelming. You would literally need a brain the size of a building to handle all that information in real time. It's just not biologically possible. So evolution didn't build a better camera. It came up with a much cleverer workaround. And that solution is something called a saccade. Saccades are these incredibly fast, jerky, and almost totally unconscious eye movements that are constantly shifting your fovea, that tiny high-def window, around a scene. Your brain is basically pointing this tiny little spotlight at anything it thinks is a region of interest, gathering a quick snapshot of high-res data. Then it stitches all those snapshots together, kind of like a collage, to create your coherent mental model of the world. So you see, you don't see the world, you sample it. And these movements are happening constantly. I mean, you saccade about 3 times every single second. Just look at this chart. That's way more often than you blink or even take a breath. It's this frantic, non-stop dance your eyes are doing to build your visual world, piece by piece. And your brain is so good at this, it even does another trick called saccadic masking, where it basically hits pause on your vision during the movement itself, so you never notice the blurry motion of your own eyeballs. This analogy just perfectly captures what you experience moment to moment. Vision isn't this clear, open window. It really is like driving through a thick fog, where only a narrow cone of light from your headlights reveals the road in sharp detail. Your brain is constantly just swinging that cone of light around, lighting up tiny patches of the scene, and then confidently pretending it sees everything else just as clearly. That, right there, is how you see the world. But the efficiency hacks don't stop with just moving the eye around. Before any of that information even gets to the brain to be stitched together, another incredible act of data compression has to happen right inside the eye itself. Welcome to the Retina's Great Data Squeeze. Take a look at that number, 126 to 1. This ratio is at the very heart of the next great secret of our vision. It represents this brilliant and kind of brutal active data compression that happens inside your eye before a single signal even begins its journey to your brain. So what does that 126 to 1 ratio actually mean? Well, your retina has about 126 million light-sensitive cells, the rods and cones. But the optic nerve, think of it as the biological cable carrying all that information to your brain, is only made of about 1 million neurons. This is a massive engineering bottleneck. So somehow, the data from 126 million inputs has to be intelligently squeezed down to fit into just 1 million channels. How in the world is that possible? Well, it's possible because the retina doesn't treat all information equally. It has 2 types of sensors that are specialized for different jobs. First, you have rods. You've got about 120 million of them, and they're almost all in your periphery. They are fantastic at detecting motion and seeing in really low light, but they don't really do color. They're your black and white night vision. Then you have cones. There are only about 6 or 7 million of these, and they are packed super densely in your fovea, that tiny high-res spot. They are the specialists for seeing color and fine detail, but they need bright light to work well. So here's the crucial point. Because of that massive bottleneck, the retina can't send raw, pixel-by-pixel data to the brain. It's physically impossible. Instead, it sends a highly processed representation of the image. It basically acts like a sophisticated edge detection engine. Retinal cells are wired to get really excited by contrast, a light spot next to a dark spot, but to basically ignore uniform, boring areas like a blank wall. It filters the scene, throwing away all the redundant information and prioritizing signals that tell the brain about an edge, a change in color, or a sudden contrast. Your retina isn't camera film. It's a brilliant on-site editor. And this is where our story takes a really fascinating turn. Because all of these biological hacks, the limited fovea, the rapid saccades, the data-squeezing retina, they're not just fun facts about biology. They have become the direct inspiration and the actual blueprint for how we teach computers to see. This is biology's ghost in the machine. Look at this. It's a direct parallel. The computational problems that evolution solved are the exact same ones AI engineers are facing today. Humans have 2 types of attention. Over-attention is what we do at saccades, physically moving our eyes to point our fovea at something. Covert attention is our ability to mentally focus on something out of the corner of our eye without actually looking at it. Well, AI engineers built digital versions of that. Hard attention in an AI is like our overt attention. The model picks one specific region of an image to analyze in detail. Soft attention is like our covert attention. It looks at the whole image but computationally gives more importance, or weight, to the most relevant pixels. And modern AI vision systems, specifically things called Convolutional Neural Networks, or CNNs, they also mimic the retina's filtering process. You can think of a CNN as an assembly line of artists. The first, low-level layers, they're like a sketch artist. They do exactly what our retina does. Just look for simple edges, lines, and contrasts. The next layers are like a sculptor. They take those simple lines and start to assemble them into more complex shapes and textures. And finally, the high-level layers act as a master curator, putting all those shapes together to identify the final, complex object, like a face, or a cat, or a car. And this brings us to our final section, from seeing to understanding. Because even though AI has gotten unbelievably good at mimicking our biological hardware for the task of identification, there is still a profound gap between identifying objects and truly understanding what they mean. You see, humans and machines, we fail in completely opposite ways. We humans are generally pretty bad at fine-grained recognition. Most of us, me included, can't reliably tell the difference between 120 breeds of dogs. But a machine trained on millions of images, it's fantastic at that. But where machines fail is with high-level context. An AI can identify a dog with near-perfect accuracy, but it can't understand that the dog is at a birthday party. It doesn't grasp the relationship between the dog, the little paper party hat, and the cake on the table. It sees the pixels, but it doesn't get the picture. And so we end with a question that really is the final frontier. We've built these machines that can see with astonishing accuracy, all by copying the shortcuts and efficiency hacks of our own biology. But the challenge now isn't just about identifying features. It's about interpretation, context, and meaning. The journey from Plato's old I-beams to modern neural networks proves that vision was never just about what we see. It's about what we understand. And whether a machine can ever cross that final threshold from simply seeing to truly understanding, well, that remains to be seen.